In the heart of Africa, where the sunsets ablaze the savannah, a tale unfolds, a tale of power, of contradictions, and of the enigma that was Mobutu Sese Seko. Anti-communist yet sculpted by Mao Zedong's embrace, an African revolutionary yet colluding with former masters, Afrocentric visions cloaked in European luxury. On January the 17th of 1961, with the help of the CIA and the Belgian government, Mobutu Sese Seko conspired the execution of DRC's Prime Minister and pan-Africanist Patrice Lumumba. This marked the start of Mobutu's 31-year reign of atrocious autocracy, characterized by death, poverty, kidnappings, and murders in the now Democratic Republic of the Congo. Welcome to another episode of Serious History. To fully understand Mobutu's rise and fall, we must first go back to the very beginning. In 1885, the Belgian King Leopold II seized the African landmass as his personal possession following the 1884 Berlin Conference. Within 2 decades, Leopold II had killed more than 10 million Africans and mutilated millions more. Responding to these massacres, the Belgian government took over the Congo. They established churches to brainwash the local population to submissions and created a government made of 100% Europeans. Through colonial educations and programs that compelled Africans to obey the colonial laws, the Belgians managed to rule Congo with brute for decades. So what was Mobutu's early life like? While the Belgians effectively controlled the DRC, a future dictator was being born in Lisala, a town about 1,000 kilometers from Leopoldville, which was later renamed Kinshasa, the current capital of the DRC. Born in 1930 as Joseph Desire Mobutu, a mere mortal soul, yet ambition engulfed him whole. A wolf in sheep's clothing, he would appear. At a young age, Mobutu's father left his family, forcing his mother to send him to a Christian Catholic boarding school for his education. The school effectively shaped him to become an evolué, basically an African who came to regard his culture as primitive compared to his foreign counterparts. However, after illegally moving to Leopoldville to drink and meet women, he was expelled, and this would prove to be the single most gargantuan moment of his life. Fate, with its mystic tendrils, led young Mobutu to the colonial army. Punishment, they said, yet within its barracks the spark of knowledge ignited as the written word became his ally. In his 7 years in the army, he became a voracious reader and writer. He was inspired by the writings of Chairman Mao of the Chinese Communist Party, as well as the writings of the Italian philosopher Niccolo Machiavelli. Machiavelli basically argued that rulers should strive to maintain or expand their position, even if immoral acts are necessary to accomplish that goal. It is said that Mobutu could recite Machiavelli's Prince in his sleep. The prince's art of governance danced in his heart, molding a leader not bound by convention. Now, how did Mobutu Sese Seko meet Patrice Lumumba? How did the former conspire to assassinate Lumumba? Mobutu became one of the few journalists in Congo at the time, where he mastered the art of propaganda while contributing to newspapers in Leopoldville. Through his press contacts, Mobutu met and befriended Patrice Lumumba, the nationalist leader and steward of the Movement National Congolais, or MNC in short. Sensing that Congo's independence was virtually inevitable, Mobutu soon joined MNC, a move that would prove detrimental to Lumumba and the future of the Congo. At first, Mobutu was a dear friend to Patrice Lumumba. He vehemently supported Lumumba's proposals for a strong centralized Congo. In 1960, when Patrice Lumumba was jailed for his nationalist activities, Mobutu Sese Seko represented Patrice at the Brussels Round Table Conference on Congo's independence until his release. Of course, by 1960, several African countries including Ghana, Guinea, Cameroon, Morocco, and Senegal had gained their independence. The pan-Africanist movement spread across the continent, which was led by Kwame Nkrumah, and this was enough motivation for Lumumba to force the Belgians to free the country from its colonial masters. Patrice Lumumba, with the help of Mobutu Sese Seko, gave the Belgians a 30-day ultimatum to surrender the country to the Africans. The Congo became independent on June 30, 1960, and a coalition government was formed between the Premier Lumumba and President Joseph Kasavubu. Barely 2 weeks into the new government, rebels sponsored by the Belgian government in the Katanga region initiated secession movements. The chaos that engulfed the country worsened by the day, and this forced Lumumba to dissolve the government. Consequently, Mobutu Sese Seko was appointed to be in charge of the army. Lumumba's assassination reports from the CIA chief of station in Leopoldville described the situation in the Congo as a classic communist takeover and squarely laid the blame on Patrice Lumumba. As such, in the fateful night of the 17th of January 1961, Lumumba and his associates were lined up against a tree and executed by a firing squad authorized by the British and the Belgians. Before his execution, Lumumba was forced to literally eat the paper that had his independence speech written. Now that Lumumba went to be with the ancestors, Congo, the jewel of Mobutu's aspirations, lay before him. Amidst upheaval and uncertainty, Mobutu seized power, the conductor of his symphony. The Congo had extremely low literacy levels, which subjected them to manipulation through Mobutu's treachery and Western-influenced propaganda. Nevertheless, this was not Congo's biggest problem. You see, during the 1933 reforms, the colonial government divided the country into 6 administrative regions, disregarding ethnic diversity and tribal order in the country. The old British rule of divide and conquer worked perfectly to the detriment of the Congolese population. You might ask why the CIA would be involved in the political assassination of a leader of an African country thousands of miles away from Washington. See, Congo was, still is rich in copper, uranium, diamond, gold, and other minerals. Like they never left, the USSR and the USA made Congo their battleground because of the uranium. The USA was afraid that Lumumba would give his allies, the USSR, liberty to mine uranium in the country. As we, the Kiswahili people, say, fahali wawili wakipigana, nyasi huumia, which literally translates to when 2 bulls fight, it is the grass that dies. Now that his political rival was out of the way, Mobutu Sese Seko took over and ruled with an iron fist. He abolished all party politics and nationalized all major companies. Seated comfortably in power, Mobutu adopted the title of Marshal. He even renamed himself to Mobutu Sese Seko Koko Ngembendu Wazabanga, which translates to the all-powerful warrior who, because of his endurance and flexible will, win-win, goes from conquest to conquest, leaving fire in his wake. By the way, Sese Seko in Lingala language translates to he who leaves no hen untouched. A strapping 6-footer, Mobutu affected leopard skin that had soon become synonymous to his personal symbol. To cement his autocratic leadership and cult of fear, he directed the evening news programs to show him descending from the clouds. Quite a drama queen this one, huh? He used the media to steer one of the most effective propaganda in modern history of Africa. He even changed the country's name to Zaire and made it a one-party state. The country's currency also renamed Zaire. So what about Mobutu's positive side, if there is any? To be fair, the first few years under Mobutu's rule saw the thriving of Zaire. He managed to bring together all the regions and tribes in the Congo. In the 1970s, he stabilized the country's currency, nationalized the country's copper industry, and significantly improved the people's well-being. Mobutu built Africa's largest dam and connected an extensive power from Inga to Katanga. Encouraged by the US, foreign investors streamed in to get a piece of the Congo. America's President Nixon praised Mobutu for being an emblem of Africa's success. Mobutu Sese Seko renamed all cities, including Elizabethville and the capital Leopoldville, which were renamed Lubumbashi and Kinshasa respectively. Mobutu also supported pan-Africanism and encouraged the preservation of African culture as we see today when you visit the Congo. Diversity is one of the biggest tourist attractions of the DRC at the moment. Otherwise, this is by far the best you can say about Mobutu's success story. Needless to say, his reign was marred with countless political repression, human rights violations, and exploitation of the country's resources. In April of 1969, Joseph Kasavubu died, which meant that no one had the capability to challenge him. After consolidating power, Mobutu Sese Seko publicly ordered the hanging of Kasavubu's ministers and loyalists. It succeeded in instilling fear in the rest of the country. No one dared resist him. His biggest mistake yet was protecting the foreign nationals that mined the country's mineral wealth. Everything from beef to foodstuffs, which were once grown locally, came to be imported from Rhodesia, South Africa, and Europe. He paid the government employees whenever he wanted. For security, he relied on a presidential guard that he compensated very well. Mobutu Sese Seko spent most of the 1980s wrestling with unending economic problems due to corruption, excessive debt, and the fall of copper prices. In the 1990s, the fall of the Berlin Wall meant that the United States had no use for Mobutu's allied relationship. In 1990, democracy movements swept across Africa, and the Congo was not an exception. The mass uprising led to the massacre of students at the University of Lubumbashi. The USA and France soon joined the infighting, and the country experienced several rebellions under Mobutu Sese Seko. He was later deposed in 1997. By the end of his term, he had lived through Richard Nixon's, Ronald Reagan's, and George Bush's governments. In 3 decades of brutality, Mobutu Sese Seko had amassed wealth estimated to be between $5 billion and $10 billion. Mobutu Sese Seko is the epitome of an African leader that has betrayed their people for the sake of greed and power. At some point, his ill-acquired wealth accounted for 1/3 of Zaire's debt. Mobutu's resignation and death in the face of war in 1997, Thierry Mobutu resigned, but no one could buy his crocodile waterworks. At the time, he was diagnosed with prostate cancer. Due to the uprisings in the country and his deteriorating health, he fled to Morocco, where he died 3 months later in Rabat. With the support of Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni and Rwanda's Paul Kagame, Laurent Kabila's men marched from the east to the west to dethrone Mobutu's army. Laurent Kabila soon took over as the head of the country. Mobutu is the perfect example of a political dictator who survived against seemingly impossible odds through the strength of character, deceit, and treachery. He created a regime that still affects the Congo several decades later. So, do you think Congo would have been any different if Patrice Lumumba was still alive? Leave your comments below. To end with, a profound quote from Patrice Lumumba. The day will come when history will speak, but it will not be the history which will be taught in Brussels, Paris, Washington, or the United Nations. Africa will write its own history, and it will be to the north and to the south of the Sahara, a history of glory and dignity. I'm all out, guys. If you find value in this video, please subscribe and share. Kwaheri.